Alrighty, guys. So today we're going to be talking about charcoal. So for today's practice, you're going to need these two handouts, the charcoal techniques handout and the charcoal shading activity. And you're going to need your baggie of supplies. In this baggie, you'll have one of two types of pencils. You either have this orange one or this black one. You'll have a little tortillon white blender stick. You'll have a few pieces of very thin, very light charcoal. You'll have a piece of very thick charcoal, a kneaded eraser, and then you're also going to need a brown paper towel for this. So make sure you have your supplies. And then we're going to start off with this paper right here. So this one, we're just going to be practicing a few of the different things that we can do with charcoal. Just kind of get a feel of how the materials work and how they're used. So what we're going to need first is you're going to need to just grab one of the very thin pieces of charcoal. So this right here is actually called vine charcoal. It's also sometimes referred as willow, and it makes some of the softest marks of the charcoal tools we have here, and it covers very quickly as well. So we're going to use this for our blending here at the top. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this, and just like we would with a normal pencil, we're just going to use it and we're going to add some value to this box we have here. So just like normal shading, we want to start off with a little bit of extra pressure, but then we're going to slowly let up pressure to create variations so we have value. Now the awesome thing with charcoal is it blends out a lot, so we don't need to go all the way to the end. We can leave quite a bit of white over here. We're just going to add some of that value here. And then what we're going to do is this is going to show us the technique for finger blending. So we're just going to take our finger and we're going to go right on top of that charcoal and we're going to blend it out. All right, and you're going to see right away our finger picks up a lot of the charcoal when we're blending, and that charcoal just disappears. This is normal for the vine or the willow charcoal to do. It's perfectly okay. So we're going to just blend that right out, and it's going to look kind of like that. Now, if you want your dark end to look a little bit darker, you can go in with your pencil that you have. This is a pencil charcoal, and you can kind of just go back and add some value back into this dark area. Just very lightly, just like a normal graphite shading. Don't go all the way, and then again with your finger, you're just going to take it and you're going to blend it out. And notice with this one, it actually stays a little bit darker and doesn't blend out quite as easily as the vine does. So these are two very different, uses for the materials that we have. And if it's a little bit of a rough edge, you can always erase it a little bit with the knead eraser, but we're not too worried about that. Taking your willow again in your hand, we're going to go ahead and go into the next box, which is the tortillon. And just like before, we're going to create our value, fading it out, and filling in that box the best that we can. All right, and this is the tortillon. So the tortillon is a tool some people absolutely love, some people are not a fan of. It's essentially a piece of paper that has been rolled up super tightly and is just used for creating the blending effect. So you can see it doesn't blend quite as nicely as our fingers. It does take a little bit of extra time to really get that blending to come out with the tortillon. But the tortillon is really great to use for smoother details because you can see the texture is very different from the finger, and it's also good for smaller details, so it really helps get some of those small details in there. Now the tortillon doesn't pick up as much of the charcoal as our finger did at the beginning, but you still might want a little bit of a darker value at that far end. So if you want to go back in with your pencil and darken that up and then use your tortillon again to kind of smooth that out and blend it out. That is perfectly okay. And just like that. Now as you're working, you might notice that you start having a little bit of a buildup of charcoal on your paper. I don't know if you can see on mine, but there is a little bit of a buildup happening there. Do not use your hand and brush it because that's going to get charcoal everywhere. Just kind of go off to the side and tap it. And that way you're not having charcoal kind of going all over your paper and leaving smears. And then at the very end, we can just clean up the table afterwards. Now for this last one, we're going to do the exact same thing as the other two. We're going to fill in with our willow and creating our variations of shades here. Just filling that in as fast as we can. And this time we're going to be using our paper towel. So this is my personal preferred way of blending. I just really like how the shades come out and how it smooths. What I do to do this blending is I'll take my paper towel and I'll fold it into a triangular shape, and then I will keep folding it, making sure I have a very sharp point until I have a bit of a thickness that I'm happy with, that I can then take. I'll put my finger right there in that corner that I just made, and I will use that corner to do my blending. So I'm going to take it and I'm just going to blend this out. So it's a little bit less control, a little bit less control than our tortillon, but it blends out much smoother than our fingers. And you can see just how smooth that can get compared to our finger and tortillon. And then again, going back in with our pencil and really blending that out and creating that variation in color and tone. And everyone has their own preference, so some people love to use the paper towel, some people love to use their tortillon, some people love the texture of the finger. So no matter which one you choose, this is just to give you an idea of how the different ones look. You will have a little bit of charcoal in your finger at the end of this. It's okay, as long as you just keep it away from white clothing, it'll be perfectly fine. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to practice some of the different marks you can make with your charcoal. So again, we're going to be taking our willow or our vine, and we're just going to come here in this box and we're just going to make a few different types of marks. So you can see even with very minimal pressure, it does make some kind of dark marks. You can apply a little bit more pressure, you can get a thicker thing. You don't want to push too hard though, because vine charcoal is actually really fragile. You can tell by how light it is. Too much pressure and it will break into pieces. And it's a little bit harder to work with when you have a very tiny piece like this. You could potentially do this if you want to do like super wide like that, but just try not to use too much pressure when you're working with your vine there. So there are some of the marks you can make with your vine. Now we're going to make some marks with our pencil. So going back to our pencil, we can see kind of how light, so you can see with the pencil we can have a little bit more control of how light or dark we can really get some of those lines. Now the downside, it doesn't go quite as thick as our willow or vine charcoal does. The lines pretty much stay thin, so pencil is typically used for when you're adding small little details onto your pieces. Next we have our compressed charcoal. So that's this thing right here. So this one, it feels a little bit different. It's square shaped, looks similar to our vine, but it's not quite the same. It might feel a little cold to touch, but you can kind of feel the thickness. It's very more compact. So this one, we're going to just make some lines here, and you can use the very tip of it, just kind of very carefully put it on its edge right here to create thin lines. And it's kind of like a pencil in that you have a little bit more control over the darkness of your lines. But unlike the pencil, you can make some thicker lines too. So you can really add on thickness. Now, one downside that I found with a compressed is when you're working on filling in large areas, because it's a flat surface, it has a tendency to squeak. So that might be a little bit of a problem for some people. But the awesome thing about compressed charcoal is it's very much like the pencil in that it keeps very dark variations no matter which the blending tools that you use, and it can fill a lot of area very quickly, unlike the pencil. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to our vine charcoal, and for this last box we're actually going to fill it in real quick with some vine. And then taking your preferred method of blending, we're going to just blend out this area real fast. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to kind of get that shape in there. And then we're going to take our kneaded eraser. Now, if your kneaded eraser is kind of black looking, it should be kind of gray, but if it's kind of black looking, it might have charcoal in it. The awesome thing about kneaded erasers is they actually are self-cleaning. So that just basically means you have to take it and you have to just pull it apart, just like this. So just pull, you're not breaking the eraser, you're just cleaning it when you do this. So just rip it apart until it looks kind of grayish. And just get to a point there. And then kneaded erasers are exactly what they sound like. You can knead them into different shapes. So if you want to have a very thin shape, you can thin it out. If you want it a little bit thicker, you can thicken it. We're just going to take our kneaded eraser and we're going to go straight through that charcoal we just laid down. And you can see it doesn't pick up all of the charcoal. It does leave a little bit behind, but it does a decent job on picking up some of it. So if you do put down some color and you decide you don't like it or you want a little bit of a lighter shade, the kneaded eraser is a good option to use to kind of pick up some of those shades so you're not left behind with just that dark color. So that is the charcoal techniques. We're going to move on now to the shading, where we're going to take what we just learned and we're going to apply it to some shapes to create some 3D forms. So we're going to start off with this circle here. So again, taking our vine charcoal, we're going to take and fill in this circle to its fullest. And it doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to take our preferred method of blending and we're going to blend it out. And then if you have a little bit on the edges that you want to fill in, you can go ahead and fill that in just slightly, just like that. All right. And now what we want to do is, now that we have a decent layer on the bottom, we want to start building up our values. Alrighty. So what we want to do is, with our pencil, we're going to take it and we're going to create a C shape that goes just along the bottom of our circle here, but not actually touching the bottom of the circle. This is just going to kind of wrap around from here to here. You can also describe it as like a moon shape, just kind of in the center here. And then taking our blending tool, we're just going to blend that out. And that's going to create a darker value right here towards the bottom. And then we're going to have to go in and fill in our lighter value now. And again, in order to do that, we're going to need our kneaded eraser. And we're going to take it and we're going to come towards this top portion right here that we just left sitting open and without the dark value. And we're going to take it and we're going to just kind of tap our eraser in there. Start lifting some of that color back up. And we can go a little bit on this edge here, just slightly. And then we also actually have a little bit of light that's going to be shining down on this edge. And as you're working with the eraser, it's going to fill up with charcoal, so you can continue pulling and moving it and kneading it so that you can continue using it and you're not using a dirty eraser to try and create these values. So just like that. And if your tool ends up getting dirty at some point, you can always, at least with the paper towel, you can always move it. The tortillon, you can always go to a different area. With your fingers, you have a bunch of fingers. You can always trade out which finger you're using. And you're just going to come in here and kind of blend out some of that value, just put back in. All right, and then to finish it out, we're actually going to create a bit of a shadow. So we're going to come down here below the circle, and with our pencil, we're going to come and create a round shape right here, and then fill that in ever so carefully underneath the circle. Don't go inside the circle, just fill in underneath. And then we're going to also take our pencil and actually follow along the top of our circle. Again, not going inside of it, just going along the top here. And that's going to be pulled out just the slightest bit, just like that. And then we're going to finish off with blending, just like before. So taking our tool and careful to not hit our circle that we just finished, we're going to blend out this shadow down here. And for shadows, they're usually a little bit of a softer edge, so they don't have to be hard edges around it. You kind of want to go ahead and soften that out. That is okay to have a softer one. And then same thing for this top here. We're going to blend this out just like that. Now we don't want our shadows to completely meet, so if you end up doing that where they completely meet, you can always take your kneaded eraser and kind of lighten back up that shadow just the slightest bit, but creating that variation so we have a difference between our background and our circle or our sphere that we just finished. And then you can always go back with your kneaded eraser. If you ended up hitting some of those highlights, you can always go back and bring them back out so that you can still see those bright spots that create that dynamic look. And that's how you make a sphere. Now we're going to move on and we're going to create a cone-like shape. So to start off, we have two lines that form a triangle, but to create a cone, we actually need a curve at the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to put in that curve right now by ourselves. So just create a curve, doesn't have to be perfect there. Taking our vine charcoal, we're going to again lightly fill in the shape on the inside, just like we did with our circle. And then we're going to blend it out. All right, it's all right if you hit this line that we just made down there because we're going to clean this up in just a little bit. Now, taking our pencil, we're going to come in here and we're going to create a line that goes from the tip of the top of the cone and not falling down exactly the center, but kind of to the side. We're going to come and fill this in with some value. We're not going to go all the way over to the right. We're not going to go all the way to the middle, close to the left. We're going to go straight there, just kind of, just hanging out in the middle there. And then we're going to blend this out. Lots of blending. Charcoal is all about blending, so you're going to be doing a lot of that. And then again, you can go outside the lines. The cone is one of the hardest shapes to make sure to stay in the line, especially at the top with using the tools. So if you go out, it's okay. You can just use your eraser to fix up some of those lines. And then again, you want to use the eraser to kind of bring some of that value back in with our highlights. So we're going to come over to the left-hand side and we're just going to pick up some of that charcoal that we placed down earlier to create a highlight here. And we're going to pick up just a little bit along the edge here and along this bottom of our cone. And then to help put it into a space, we're going to come along the edge over here, a little bit over here, and a little bit down here. And then we're going to create just a little bit of a triangle out over here that's going to be our shadow. All right, and then just like with the circle, we're going to blend it out. And this is going to help set our cone into a space kind of similar to our circle or our spheres. And again, we don't have perfect shadowy edges. It's very rare, so those can be kind of smoky and blended out. And if you're noticing you have a buildup charcoal again, you can just top it to the side. That way you're not getting charcoal everywhere. And then you should have a square. Now I kind of lost, or a cone. I kind of lost my edge right here, so I'm going to come back and just tap a little bit of this out on this edge just to bring it back just slightly. But you can see that variation that is taking place, creating that rounded effect there. All right. And then this side's actually a lot brighter than that side, so I want to build that out just a little bit more there, just like that. All right. And finally, we're going to move on to our square. Now, boxes are an interesting thing to shade. Let me just tell you, when I was first in a drawing class in college, we spent 3 months working on shading boxes. And that has got to be one of the most boring things you can do, spending 3 hours twice a week just staring at a box, shading it. But it really does come in handy. And those boxes did look pretty realistic by the time we finished. But it was miserable. Now, I'm not going to make you guys spend 3 hours twice a week drawing boxes for the next 3 months. So I'm going to give you a quick little demo on how we draw boxes and how to make them look more dynamic. Just like our other shapes, we need to start by adding our basic values to them, just like that. All right, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It can be a little messy, so we're just going to leave that. Now, the top of our box is actually the lightest point, and this side of our box is actually our standard side. So we're going to leave this alone, and we're going to take our pencil, and we're actually going to come to this third side, and we're going to follow along this edge here. And just like this, and we're going to create a little bit of a curve. All right, and that's all we're going to do to this side before we go ahead and blend it out. All right, and a really important thing with charcoal is the dark value of it is what really helps push to make things look so three-dimensional and so dynamic. So when you're working with charcoal, don't be afraid to really just put some of that color down, put some of that darkness down, and really make it dark. You don't want to go all the way black instantly, but creating those variations between the super dark and the super light really helps make things look like they're popping off the page. So now we're going to take our kneaded eraser, and coming back to this top one, we're just going to come and erase some of that value that we put up there. We can leave a little bit behind because obviously it's not going to be 100% white, but we can erase a little bit off there, and we can actually take it and erase a little bit off from the side here too, just a little bit, not a lot. And we're going to come back to our pencil, and we're going to go and follow this line right here and along the top here. And then we're going to bring it just a little bit halfway down the side. That's going to put it into a space. And then for a shadow, the shape's actually a little different than a standard box. So we're going to go out from here, and then we're going to create almost a pentagon-like shape. So it's going to have this little house and then go back into the box. And then fill that in. And then finally, just like the rest of our shapes, we're going to blend out all of that value. All right, and we can really start to see it setting into place. Honestly, this is always my favorite part, is when it really starts to look like it is fixated in a plane where it's supposed to be. And we can add a little bit of value around the box, using some of that extra that we have remaining until we are left with a box looking just like so. So at this point, you should have 3 shapes, and they should have basic shadings to them. Now the key to shading with charcoal, honestly, is just really taking the time to observe the variations. So it's not going to be just a solid black side of the box. You know, there's going to be some dark. You can see there's still a little bit of light that's showing through on this box. And having those variations from dark to light, even on sides that are supposed to be the darkest, are really what's going to make the difference between a box that looks three-dimensional and a box that just looks like a flat box. So once you're done with this, you're all complete and you are all set to move on to the next activity.